Hello Internet, I'm the Disney Brain, and a few weeks back, we discussed what makes a Ranger character underwhelming at best, or just no good at worst. So, it's only natural that we now flip that script and discuss what makes some of the best Ranger characters the best. It bears noting, since there was some confusion last time, that this video isn't meant to be a true-to-form list, or a countdown. It's not really a top 10, so the last Ranger we talk about isn't necessarily the one I think is best. This is more of a discussion to allow us to talk about what we look for in a Ranger, and what traits, mentalities, or personalities they have that makes them memorable to us. And, as with all of our more discussion-focused videos, the priority will be on all of you and what your thoughts are on the matter. So, with all that said, allow me to share mine. When we discussed the worst Rangers, I spent some time focusing on Megaforce for clear reasons. And the best way to parlay that portion of the discussion to this one is to highlight Troy and Gia. I point out these two specifically because both are considered ideal, in a loose sense of the word. That's fine as a start, but when it's all said and done, nothing ever really challenges the perception we're supposed to have of these two. Great Ranger characters don't necessarily have to grow ad infinitum to be great, but they should at least be tested so they don't come off as hollow. Which brings us to Theo Martin. Theo is also defined initially as being the ideal Ranger. Sharp, focused, talented, and does not let his relatively small stature deter him in the slightest. So, the smart thing they do in Jungle Fury is understand this simple idea. If Theo is so great that he can barely remember a time when he wasn't, Casey would naturally bother him at first, since he isn't great to start and also just sort of showed up. Even before Casey becomes the Red Ranger, there is a bit of resentment there. So then, they use his relationship with Lily to nudge Theo into realizing that his greatness can actually help others become great too. And just as importantly, Theo learns both from and about Casey through that experience. But then what happens? Because he's so gifted, he gets the hang of this pizza making thing too, and pretty soon, he's doing 10 things at once, 2 mixed results. So then, Master Swoop allows him to see that making small adjustments can have large impacts. Theo is a great example of an initially ideal character because no character is perfect. Even the ones that seem flawless come with their own baggage, their own hang-ups, and Jungle Fury gets it right by challenging his mentality, thus making him a better teammate and a better Ranger, and eventually a better boyfriend. We hope. They don't actually show us what happens next. In line with the idea of challenging the ideal archetype brings us the incredible journey of Skye Tate. Most of us know the story. He lost his father young, he's wanted to be the Red Ranger ever since, and he is a strict, by-the-book, no-nonsense, built-like-a-tank Ranger. Just like with Jungle Fury, the best way to develop Rangers like these are through well-conceived character dynamics, because nobody grows too much on their own. Skye thankfully has the definitive Ranger mentor calling the shots. A mentor that knows he's not ready to lead initially, which ends up slowly pushing him towards being ready in the end. What we see with Skye is a patient unraveling of his past and how that affects his present. And what we ended up with is one of the most genuine characters in the entire franchise, regardless of how likable or not he ends up being. In a season where the entire larger point was that the world ain't so cut and dry, Skye being heavily flawed socially was the perfect foundation for everything he experienced. Bridge always knows what's up. Z lived through everything SPD tries to fight against, and in many ways represents everything they're trying to fight for. But Skye needed to change, and the plethora of perception-shattering missions he goes on brings that change out of him. Like Eric, it's not a quick hit I suddenly see the light sort of thing, nor should it be, but eventually he comes to terms with everything that's really eating at him, including his father's murder. He'll never be my favorite Blue Ranger, that honor belongs to Kai, but he's undoubtedly one of the best. Also, I'd be remiss to not at least point out characters like Jen Scott, Taylor Earhart, and Scott Truman, all of which develop in somewhat similar ways. Now, let's segue out of the imperfectly perfect Ranger and transition into themes and narratives. Previously, I talked about how my biggest problem with Lucas is how unnecessary he is relative to the larger Time Force ideas. Great seasons have great narratives, great seasons have something to say, and great characters help said seasons convey their message, which brings us to Lucas's Time Force counterpart, Wesley Collins. Wes might just be the strongest Ranger character in terms of connecting to the themes at play, the most prominent being changing your destiny, It's something that happens with many characters in this season, but most of that happens through the direct influence of Wes. Jen changes for the better, specifically because Wes earns his stripes every step of the way, resulting in an eventual romantic attraction. Eric changed his destiny already, but he still eventually changes for the better too, specifically because Wes is adamant about reaching out to him. And Mr. Collins changes for the better specifically because he sees Wes making a real difference and decides it's high time to finally start listening to his son, even following his example. And more indirectly, Tripp's passion for humanity is only amplified and justified by having his initial faith in Wes rewarded, which then facilitates Nadira's change, and we all know how that ends. Time Force as a season works because Wes is so tightly integrated into so much of what's happening here on a personal level, and it all starts with his initial step, realizing that he was coasting a bit, that he didn't know how to fight for anything, but then he learned, he changed, and he became an all-time great. The same type of thematic integration can also be seen in characters like Casey Rhodes, Z Delgado, Cole Evans, and Dr. Tommy Oliver, all to varying degrees. Wes being heavily focused on allowed him to be so crucial to his team and the season, but some Ranger greats can be great without as much direct focus because they operate more subtly as a means of keeping things together. Summer Lansdowne is a great example of just that. She acted as an infallible support system for anyone who needed it at the time, which is an amazing change to make just 1 year removed from being spoiled, selfish, and not all that helpful to anyone, honestly. A lot of that support ends up going towards Dylan, because he's one of the most important characters here, but she's also a necessary source of comfort for Dr. K. But it's not just played off as her being the only other girl before Gemma shows up. No, she's actually listening to Kay. She's paying attention. That's why she's the one to first understand Kay's feelings for Ziggy before maybe even Kay understands it. On top of that, she can and has led when necessary to positive results. There's not much she can't do, but we understand where it's coming from. So she's never a fix-everything Deus Ex Machina sort. She's just very, very, very competent, both mentally and emotionally. But what happens when a subtle support system is taken away? How does that impact a team? Unfortunately, we know exactly what that looks like through Lost Galaxy. In that season, Kendrix Morgan functions a lot like Summer, but it's framed differently. While Summer's means of assistance are often tied to the actual missions, themes, and plot points of RPM, Kendrix forms strong bonds with her team simply by being an endearing person. It's made very clear as soon as she hits the scene that she wants to be here. She's diligent and intelligent, but also just as excitable and kind-hearted as anyone, which is partly why she's so easy to gravitate towards. She's already close with Kai to start, but the second she meets Leo, there's an instant connection there, and at some point after meeting Damon, she learns when his birthday is and acts accordingly. And after meeting Maya, they become close friends almost immediately, something Maya desperately needs since Stone Planet and all that. Initially, the way Kendrix glues together the team doesn't have much to do with Trakina, Scorpius, or anything space-related. It's just a priceless trait she happens to have. But then, it's made to matter narratively, which is why Power of Pink was so poignant. Lost Galaxy is built on the idea of sacrifice. However, the team was able to soldier on fairly well after most of the sacrifices they faced to that point. But not as much this one. This was the literal and figurative breaking point, because the glue was now gone. And the very next episode, no smiles, no laughs, no nonsense. Just get the job done. It doesn't happen much, but on the back of some terrible real-world circumstances, we got to see the effect of losing such a vital piece of the team's puzzle. With both aforementioned characters, we see how things can, or did, start to fall apart without them, even without the same kind of dynamic character arc some of their peers received. But some of the best leaders can also function as a less subtle but still necessary support system, as is the case with Theodore J. Jarvis Johnson, but please, call him TJ. His even temperament and low-key demeanor, alongside taking more charge when necessary, vastly improved the back half of Turbo and all of In Space, and both teams absolutely needed what he brought. A lot of that also applies to Carter Grayson, a man I've lauded as the gold standard of his role, because, let's be honest here, the team he's got around him aren't exactly all-stars. Some of them are pretty good, yeah, but Carter's the only Ranger on Lightspeed I'd call top 5 in his position. He's able to connect with, or at least understand, all of the divergent personalities on his team, and in doing so, he commands respect without demanding respect. And that's after he sees a chance to save the world and does not hesitate to jump right in. As both a leader and as a necessary support system, he simply makes the entire team that much better, that much more cohesive than they ever would have been. The man was so good at his job, so humble, respectful, and self-sacrificing that he inspired real-life fans to become real-world heroes. It just doesn't get better than that, honestly. And last, but certainly not least, let's talk about the Underdogs. It's one of my favorite type of stories in the entire spectrum of entertainment. I love The Karate Kid, I love The Mighty Ducks, I love most Rocky movies, and because of that, most Rangers that have this trajectory of upward mobility, despite the setbacks or doubts, resonate with me almost by rule. Eric Myers had that going for him. Nobody gave Cam much of a shot initially, on top of needing to overcome the legitimate fears of his parents. With Casey, most of the season revolves around him going from Towel Boy to Tiger Master. The entire SBD team was, by definition, a squad of backups. And with Leo, as I've often said, he shouldn't even be here, nor was he the Quasar Saber's first choice. But every single one of those aforementioned Rangers worked their asses off to become more than even they thought they could be. But perhaps the best example thereof is the one and only Ziggy Groover. Not to say that he's the best character of the aforementioned names, but he is more of an underdog than any of them. He is, by his own admission, weak and incompetent, but he still uses what he's got and does what he can to save the day. And over time, he does get a hang of his powers. He can fend off gangs of hostiles that prior to now would have ghosted him in seconds, and he can be the bigger person, as he literally saves the life of the man that wants to end his. All that stuff Kay was saying about humans being better than machines, despite the flaws, it all goes back to him. It's beautiful character progression on multiple fronts. So, I've rambled on and on about several amazing Rangers, but what does this all mean? Are they really all the best? Well, not necessarily, but that's exactly why I made this video, because everyone has a different idea of what makes a Ranger great, and at the heart of that idea is the bigger question of what do we value the most in characters? What are we drawn to? What resonates with us? From this video, as well as my many others, you guys could probably answer all of those questions about me, but I want to know what your answers are. What is it that makes some Ranger characters stand out as the best to you? I look forward to reading all of your responses. And for all of you that haven't checked out my previous video yet, which you totally should, it's pretty good, the next big thematic Ranger review will set controls to outer space. At long last, I'll be fully diving into the franchise savior, but it will, of course, take a bit of time, so don't expect it soon, but it will get done. And until then, thanks for watching.